In today's episode of the Motorhome Matt podcast,
we're revealing a huge change that will impact everyone with a tracker.
Find out how to save on your tickets to the big show, the Motorhome and Caravan Show, this October.
And we answer your questions on fitting a gas barbecue point, mass in-service weights, and our travelling to Europe checklist.
Welcome to the Motorhome Matt podcast. I'm Keith Gooden.
And I'm Motorhome Matt.
Industry insights and expert advice for the world of motorhomes, caravans and campervans. It's all brought to you by thatleisureshop.com.
Now, please do remember to follow on your favourite podcast app and make sure you click subscribe on YouTube, sponsored by arabescreative.co.uk.
Hot news for the big hot show, the big show, Le Grand Show at the NEC. It's come around again, Matt.
It is. It's that time of year already where we head north for our weekly holiday annual holiday for a week in Birmingham.
A weekly annual holiday and an annual weekly Birmingham. And some people travel south. In fact, a couple of years ago, there's people who came over for the day from Belfast by aeroplane.
Yeah, they do. They come from all over the world for this show. It's amazing.
It's fantastic.
And I'm on stage every day. We're back on stage for an Ask the Expert panel at 11:45 a.m. on the main stage. So you can come along. It's completely free to attend this as part of your ticket price. Come along and you can pose your question to a panel of experts, of which I will be one.
Not just a panel, but the summit of the mountain, the top of the pyramid, the fairies on the Christmas tree. These are the top people.
The fairies on the Christmas tree. We're not in costume, Keith. Not this time. That's
Be
a different
careful
show.
when you put that branch, mate. That's what I say. So
Exactly.
What can you save and how do you save it?
If you use the code MATT, M-A-T-T, head to mhmp.info/NEC show, enter that code there, M-A-T-T, and you'll save a few pence on your ticket price. Go for it.
And don't forget that free Ask the Experts every day on the Inspiration stage with Motorhome Matt, 11:45 a.m. They've got other people there, but let's face it.
I'm on stage with quite a few friends. I think there's 4 of us throughout the week. So far advertised, there's 4 of us anyway. So it's great to be on stage and get your questions. I love these panels because we've no idea what we're going to be asked. They're great fun. So yeah, come along with your question. We'd love to hear it.
It's the Motorhome Matt podcast. I'm Keith Gooden.
And I'm Motorhome Matt.
Brought to you by thatleisureshop.com. We've got some big news for you. A previous guest from GPS, Bob, told you of a big change coming. Isn't that right, Matt?
He did, yeah. So Guy from GPS Bob was recently on the podcast here. We were unpacking Thatcham. And he dropped into conversation that the network that trackers work on is being turned off. So trackers work on a 2G network, and the UK government has agreed with all the suppliers of these comms that the 2G will be turned off by 2033. That is not very far away. In fact, most of Europe has already turned their 2G network off. And this, of course, has an impact on our trackers because they all rely on the 2G phone network to communicate.
I remember having a 2G phone. I worked in High Wycombe at the time. We called it the Wycombe Brick. It was, the big ones with the aerial out the top.
Yeah.
It was so
like
portable.
a lunchbox.
Yeah, I used to have a briefcase, and I used to put it in the end of the briefcase, and the aerial used to stick out the top. But it was a mobile phone. Friend of mine, one weekend, took his Wycombe Brick up to the top of the ladder when he was doing some cleaning out of the gutter. It fell out and hit the ground. Worked perfectly afterwards. It wasn't a problem at all.
They were robust, weren't they? Was it one with a handset with a coily cable?
No, it wasn't quite that bad. No, it was the one with the big battery. No, but the audio quality was fantastic.
A friend of mine still got one, a Motorola. I can't remember the model number.
Yeah, it was a Motorola.
And with the old-fashioned LED screen.
Yep.
And he's still got it. Yeah. Takes it to the pub and it still works. And people say, is that a satellite phone? He said, no. It's a mobile phone from 1988.
But it worked on 2G, and that's the thing we're talking about, does it? So,
yeah.
So does it matter if 2G is turned off? I mean, nobody uses it, do they?
You're joking. Well, I'm on it all the time driving into work. I'm constantly got that E signal, which is the 2G network, which my mobile phone is relying on. And our phone signal around here, we're in North Somerset, is just terrible all of a sudden. It's really turned down the power. I don't know why. But so many bits of products we engage with every day in our lives are on 2G. So if you go to a country where there is no longer any 2G, your motorhome tracker is probably not going to work, which means you're no longer tracking your motorhome. So if it was stolen, how do you find out it's been nicked? is no longer communicating because it can't. So this is a massive impact for the tracking industry.
So what are they going to do?
Well, they're going to have to start introducing hardware that runs on 4G because there's no plan to turn 4G off at the moment. One day it will be. So if you've got a tracker that is 2G, you need to consider before 2033 replacing it for a 4G tracker. And bear in mind, that's a deadline. That's not the date it's being turned off. Many countries have already turned their 2G off, particularly around Europe. Here in the UK, it's still live, but there is a big move toward 4G and obviously on to 5G, which is coming. And that isn't really going to overtake 4G until probably 2029. But by 2033, the UK government have set a directive to the telecoms companies that 2G will be turned off.
Yeah, because they'll be flogging that bandwidth to somebody else. But the point is, and let me play devil's advocate here, the trackers are working on 2G, which is a low technology.
Yep.
And we know by looking at our own phones that you flip out of 4G to 3G, and then, as you say, the E on your phone. So if the trackers are then going to go to one of those higher quality bandwidths, there are occasions where the tracker isn't going to be working, isn't it? Because it can't get a 4G signal or it
Absolutely.
can't get a 3G signal.
That's
At
right.
the moment, it's at the bottom of the pile and it can always get that signal.
Yeah, that's right. So there has to be a lot of change within the telecom infrastructure in this country and across Europe. Europe are, it's fair to say, ahead of us, but this change is coming and it's not a change that I'm seeing being talked about. So I invited Guy back into the podcast. We couldn't get him here in person. We had a Zoom call with him and I asked him to unpack a bit more about this significant change. Guy, welcome back to the Motorhome Matt podcast. Thank you for joining us again. So Guy, this is a big change and the impact's going to be directly affecting many of us, in fact all of us, potentially with a tracker on any type of vehicle or piece of plant. But what then, as consumers, do we need to know?
So yeah, just trying to find out if you have a 2G or 4G device, which would be, I would suggest mainly going back to where you purchased it from would probably be the easiest way to find that out, and then move on from there. 2G as a whole, I think if you're just UK based, I don't think it's going to make as much of a difference for you there. We've got sort of a closing date on that. At the moment, the government says no later than 2033. Although, because it is no later than, it could obviously be moved sort of closer to that. Whereas Europe, you've sort of got, I think it's 22 countries out of 31 countries in Europe have already switched off their 2G. So it is sort of moving down the line on there. So it depends on how much sort of traveling you do with it.
Well, I know Germany has said they'd be turning theirs off by December 2025.
Yeah.
But that has a massive impact then for us with a motorhome with a tracker on. If we travel to Europe on holiday, it means the tracker won't work. Is that right?
Yeah, for the 2G stuff, you are going to struggle. You may still get some signals. I mean, the UK, for example, I'll use them, and I think it is across Europe a little bit. They're not turning it off, but they're not as quick to repair things as they used to be. So there may be patches of signal that you may lose on there as well. So I think the countries are obviously putting their money into the newer generation. We've had the 2G second generation, 3G third, and now we're on the fourth. Weirdly, 3G's been turned off quicker than the 2G, but there's still in the UK, a lot of infrastructure uses the 2G, such as your smart meters. I think so. The governments are a little bit more reluctant to turn it off as quickly because obviously there's still a lot of infrastructure there that wouldn't work for them. And I'm assuming as well, a lot of their infrastructure trackers, they'll have trackers on obviously government vehicles and stuff, which will again, more than likely, they'll have had 2Gs, which they'll have to start transferring that over as well.
The other consideration though, guys, if I'm only going on holiday in the UK in my motorhome, it has a tracker on and it is a 2G platform. If it's stolen, there's lots of reports of vehicles being taken to Europe when they're stolen. Yeah. Potentially that means it can no longer be tracked once it leaves Dover.
Yeah, this is another issue that we're sort of having conversations with people that they're a little bit worried about this, as you're saying. So you've got a limited amount. A lot of vehicles, obviously, if you're just staying in the UK, for the most part, isn't going to affect you. But there is obviously that element that you've just mentioned there, that even if you are just in the UK, if it does get stolen, the likelihood for a motorhome and some high-end cars, is that they're not going to stay in the UK. So that is part of a bit of an issue there, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, this isn't just an issue affecting motorhomes, it's an issue affecting trackers. So it applies to tractors, diggers, heavy plant, anything with a tracker on. So,
Yeah.
for our audience, if they've got a car with a tracker on, it's the same issue, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it could be, yeah. I mean, as I say, because we've, at the moment, the dates that we've got, we as a company, we're obviously starting to move forward with pushing more the 4G side. We have available, and we have done for a while, have the 2G and the 4G available. There is obviously a price difference on there just due to manufacturing costs and etc. But we are looking to move forward with that because we have the 5-year plans, which we discussed before. So you can just buy a tracker and you've got a 5-year plan. Looking forward to the 2030 cutoff, we're thinking, okay, so in the next 3 years, we need to really not have the 2Gs available, because then customers won't be able to get the full 5-year plan out of what they're purchasing, which is something that obviously we're sort of a little bit concerned about, that we don't want a customer to be buying it. Customer buys it in 4 years' time, then it gets shut off a little bit early. They might only get 3 years of their 5-year tracker that they've bought. So from a point of view from us, I think it's something that we're just looking forward, forward onto that, to just sort of get that gap closed up and move on to the 4G before we're forced to do it, if you like.
Yeah, well, of course, as I say, it may not work in Europe at all from the moment you've bought it, because 2G is turned off already. So, Guy, that's what you're doing at GPS Bob, which is great. But as an industry, as a tracking industry, what is your wider industry doing about this change?
Yeah, so I think a lot of companies, in fact, I would probably say most all companies have most of the 2G and 4G stuff. There's been a lot of the stuff on the 2-wire. So you've had the 2-wire, the self-install stuff that we talked about before. We've always had a sort of a 2G and a 4G version of that. There is sort of a standard. It's the Thatcham side that has been a little bit slower to take on that. So we now have the 4G Thatcham, which we're not going to continue on with, potentially with like the 2G. So we are moving forward just on the 4G, with the likelihood, obviously, with the switch off happening.
Right.
So I think as an industry, I think that is going to become the norm, is to just have the 4G coverage. So you've got worldwide coverage on there. Even if you go into a country with a 4G device, most countries, most devices will still have a 2G fallback. So the countries that don't have the 4G, it will fall back onto the 2G if needed as well. So you are covered on most 4G devices, that it will have the fallback onto that. And the Thatcham unit is one of those units that does have that fallback. So as an industry, as I say, it is becoming more of a thing to have the 4G, because it is, it's the newest generation of that. I think just moving forward, that is going to be something that the 2Gs are probably not going to be seen as much in the next sort of 2, 3, 4 years. They are going to be a lesser thing.
It was only a few weeks ago, Guy, that you were here with me in the studio, and we were unpacking kind of what is Thatcham and your range of products for tracking. But it's since then, is that right, that in the last only few weeks that you've had a 4G tracker approved by Thatcham?
Yeah, so we've been looking at doing it for a while, and we had it ready, but it was getting Thatcham to come and obviously do all the testing. So it was just a waiting on them. So I think it was actually the week after I saw you that we had all the testing done on that. And I think that's the issue, is that a lot of the stuff, because a normal 2-wire device, there is none of that stuff to go. You can just buy a 4G device and you can sell it. With the Thatcham side, it has to be approved by Thatcham, so that obviously it's insurance approved, and you've got all of those features tested to make sure that that specific device works for it. So we wanted to make sure that we're 100% on that before we started sort of throwing them out there.
Shouldn't it be the case then that Thatcham withdraw their approval of any 2G tracker going forward?
I'm not sure. The thing is, because we've still got the 2033 cut-off, at the moment, they're not sort of pushed to do it. As I say, for us as a company, it's something we're thinking about more, purely for the fact of that we still have the 5-year trackers. So I think that's the thing that we've concentrated on a little bit, because we do that. Whereas there's a lot of companies out there that are doing, you buy the tracker and then you just pay monthly, which is something that we're now starting to to do and look into doing the monthly payments, because not everyone wants to spend £160 or whatever on a tracker. I think at the moment we've got £160 for the 2G tracker with 5 years tracking. We have got a bit of a discount at the minute on the 4G, so it's £200 for the 4G trackers. And again, with your Motorhome Matt discount, again, there's another £10 off there. So it's something that we're just sort of seeing how the market views it, if you like, to see, because there is obviously the extra expense of a 4G. No matter where you're going to go, you're going to get the extra expense on the initial outlay on there. However, you're then guaranteed that for 5 years, or at least 5 years with us, you're going to be covered. Whereas the 2G, because it does say 2033 the latest, and as we're all aware, the government doesn't always follow through with what they're saying. So you can't always trust the dates that are given. We've seen that a lot. So if something happens in the industry that they decide, actually, we'll turn it off earlier, there's going to be a lot of trackers and other things that aren't going to be working. So I think moving forward, we need to preempt that date could change.
Yeah.
It could move forward. If it moves forward 3 years, our 5-year trackers are only going to be valid from next year. Yeah. Anything after next year, someone's going to be losing out.
That's all well and good. That's in the UK. But as you said earlier, across Europe, a lot of the 2G has already been turned off.
Yeah, that's it. We've got 22 countries out of the 31 have completed or are planning to shut down all of that. So it's moving forward into that. And then obviously what's going to be then happening is, as you say, there are going to be trackers that people have got that aren't going to work, and not everyone's going to know why. And that's I think that's the issue, is that because it isn't spoken about, and similar to what we had last when we did our podcast the other week, that the Thatcham stuff, it isn't really spoken about. You go to buy a motorhome, you go to drive it away, they give you the keys, you ring your insurance and say, well, hang on a minute, you haven't got a tracker on there. So we're trying to just preempt it, let people know what's going on in the industry, and countries, governments, and things shutting these things off.
Yeah,
they're aware that at some point in the next few years, if they have a 2G tracker, they need to consider potentially getting a 4G. And if they're looking at a tracker, would it be worth going to a 4G for the extra cost of 30, 40 quid to do that and just save that hassle later on down the line?
Yeah. Well, we're recording this in September 2024. So there's our date stamp on when we're raising this on the Motorhome Matt podcast. But the big question, Guy, is I've got a tracker on my motorhome and the tracker is probably 3 years old. How do I find out if it's a 2G or a 4G?
Yeah, the best way to do that is to go to where you bought it from. If you're fairly tech savvy, you could have a look at it and it may have details on there. It depends on who you bought it from. Some of them change the cases, so you don't see the details of 2G, 4G, LTE, all of that sort of stuff. So the easiest way would be to look at that. Potentially, if you also look through emails, it should usually say on your invoice for it whether it was a 2G or a 4G device as well. So that could be something to consider.
You're assuming that A, I know where the tracker is, and B, I've kept the invoice. So your advice is ring the tracking company that supplied it.
Yeah, that would probably be the easiest way, because they're going to be able to track. Obviously, they'll have your records on there. You'll have an IMEI number and things like that, so they can find it within minutes as to what device it is.
Brilliant. Guy, thanks for sharing. I think this is a really important topic that I don't think is being talked about at all for whatever reason. So it's great to have you on and to get your insight into this big and significant change. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's Guy Carter, the Technical Engineering Manager at GPS Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. It was great to get your insight. And of course, as Guy referenced to me as well in the conversation we were having, even car park meters are going to be affected by this. When you put your coins in and pay for your pay and display parking, they work on 2G. All of that industry has to reinvent itself in terms of its comms. So smart meters at home. Have you got a smart meter at home?
No,
but if you did, that is working on 2G. So there's a huge change. It's not just trackers.
But I do have solar panels.
Yeah, we know you have solar panels. You obsess about them all the time. How much have you created this morning and donated to the grid?
I haven't got me found, but it'll be something. It's quite overcast today, so it won't be fabuloso, but it'll be all right.
No, only a gentle hug that you're getting from them today.
Yeah. My son will be able to use his computer. He's upgraded his computer, by the way. Had a nice, quiet computer. He's upgraded it, spent £300, and he put an extra fans. It sounds like a jumbo jet landing now, these extra fans. It's got a water cooler in it, he said. And when you got solar panels, you can look and see how much electricity you're consuming, which is why we don't have a smart meter, because the system is basically a smart meter. And it's gone from like 350, when you're sitting there at 8 o'clock at night and he's upstairs playing his computer, to 770.
Oh, blimey.
Because this computer is, it's costing daddy money.
Of course it is, yeah. Our electric bill's doubled this year. It's ridiculous. We just had the bill through.
And it's going up by 10% in October as well.
Yeah, I know. Dreading it. It's just, life is so expensive, isn't it, these days? And this is not helping.
No. So what is
replacing our trackers?
Yeah, what is your advice for people then who own or are thinking of buying a tractor? Should they wait?
You could wait. There's no problem in waiting.
It's not going to be great for the business, is it?
No, but if you're going to Europe and you're going to a country that has already turned its 2G off, this is going to impact you now. So I would be checking your hardware, find the receipt or find the certificate of installation. It should say on there 2G or 4G, or contact the provider and they will be able to tell you whether you've got a 2G tracker. And if you have, I would be considering replacing the hardware and starting the subscription, either adopting that hardware onto your current subscription, or you may have to start a new subscription. It's about a conversation with your tracking company. So I would be getting in touch with them and asking for the facts so you can make an informed view and take action.
I've got a funny feeling we're going to be talking about this again in the future, don't you think? Because this is a big change.
Undoubtedly, yeah. And I'm hoping that we've kind of lifted the lid on it, that we get people starting to talk about it, because we're just not seeing this being talked about in the mainstream. So, let's start the conversation and make people aware, because it's really important.
It's the Motorhome Matt podcast. I'm Keith Gooden.
And I'm Motorhome Matt.
It's brought to you with thatleisureshop.com. It's our Q&A, the questions and answers, where you pose the questions and Motorhome Matt, he will answer them. And if he doesn't know, he'll ask another expert. He'll bring somebody in. It's just fantastic. It's like Star Trek, but without the tight uniforms. First of all, John Cornell has been in touch.
Hello, Keith and Matt. My name is John Cornell. We have a Swift Voyager 594. The gas bottles are on the off side of the vehicle. So if we want to have an external gas point for a barbecue, we would obviously need to have that point on the off side. Is it possible or legal to have an external pipe going from the outside gas supply under the vehicle to the near side of the vehicle so that we can then connect it to a gas barbecue? Thanks much indeed.
Sorry, John Cornell. I used to have a next door neighbour who was called Coquel. It was spelled cockle, but it's like Hyacinth Bucket, isn't it?
It's like bouquet, yeah.
Bouquet. Cheers, John Cornell. Appreciate that. So, what's the answer?
So, the question is it legal or safe? Yes, it is, provided the pipe is solid, so made of copper or some other kind of firm metal. The issue is when you want to run a flexible gas pipe over a long distance. You should really keep a flexible gas pipe as short as possible. But also, remember, John, you don't necessarily have to pick up the gas feed at the gas bottles. There might be a gas appliance on that near side of the vehicle, like the fridge or the boiler, and a heating engineer or a gas engineer could tap into the feed there and create your gas barbecue point next to that. Often the fridge is on the passenger side, so you just tap into the feed there. Your gas pipes are running all around the vehicle to feed all these appliances, so don't be obsessed by the gas bottles and their location. You could pick up a gas feed anywhere on the van. Take it to a reputable habitation check engineer, look at AWS, the approved workshop scheme, find a mobile one or a fixed one. Take it there and they will advise you.
There you go. Thanks very much for the question. David Tricky is in Tadley. Got lots of letters here, some explanations needed. Matt, hi, I'm aware of MTPLM and Myra. What are they?
They're about the gross weight of the vehicle.
Right, so he's aware of them and payloads, having driven coaches, motorhomes and towed caravans for many years. But recently I collected my new Heimer camper van, which is based on a Mercedes Sprinter panel van. On the V5 document that arrived from the DVLA, it shows a mass in service weight. What is this weight, as I've never come across it before? Thanks for the question, David.
Yeah, very good question. So the mass in service weight is often introduced by the manufacturer of the motorhome and would normally include a 75 kilogram allowance for you as the driver. That wouldn't be enough for me, I'm afraid. So that's what it is. It's about the curb weight to include a 75 kilo allowance for you, the driver. What you need to check really with Hymer is how much fuel was in the vehicle when that weight was created. I'll be honest, the easiest way, David, to check this is with the vehicle empty is go and weigh it, then look at the weight indicator on the front under the slam panel, on the bonnet, under the bonnet, and see what it says. If it's 3,500 kilograms, take the weight off that, and that's your payload. But that's basically what that measurement is. And different acronyms get used, and it's very annoying.
And 75 kilograms, is that enough?
Not for you or me, Keith.
No, I was just thinking that. What's that? That's 150 pounds, isn't it? Which is, I suppose, average for an adult male, isn't it?
Really? In this day and age. Not where I live.
Let's change the subject, shall we? Roger Domain Griffiths is in Salisbury. It's a very simple one from him. He can't find your Europe checklist that you mentioned at the Malvern show.
Dead easy. You can get it for free. Just head to thatleisureshop.com/Europe. Just pop your name in and your email, and it will be emailed to you as a PDF. And on that page is the presentation I gave at the Malvern show. It was recorded probably 18 months ago as we record this. So some of the information in there about ETIAS is out of date because the government have changed it and postponed it, as I would have referenced at the Malvern show.
Absolutely. That address again, www.thatleisureshop.com/Europe. Thanks for the question, Roger. Now, how do people get in touch, Matt?
Very easy. If you've got a question, please ask it, because I can guarantee you there are thousands of other people with the same question, too afraid to ask it. Thousands. mhmp.info/ask Matt. You can record your question with the orange button or just fill in the form and we'll read it out to you.
How do you subscribe on YouTube?
Hit the little subscribe button and the bell. Please do. Loads of our viewers are not subscribed on YouTube. We'd love it if you did. Really helps us promote the podcast.
Ding, ding.
And wins us points with YouTube, so they promote it a bit harder. And that's brought to you by arabasecreative.co.uk.
And how do people share?
We would love it if you did. If you know someone that you think would find this podcast useful, entertaining, fun, informative, whatever it might be, we'd love it if you sent them a link to it. Please do share with a friend. Thank you.